today I'm going to talk to you about AI. I've been asked to speak about AI, and specifically I'm going to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and the super consumer. Now, I spend a whole pile of time researching and talking about the consumer, how to engage the consumer, how to drive part the purchase with the consumer, how to drive stickiness with that consumer, and how to build trust with that consumer. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how AI can turn that consumer into a superhero, right? How can AI, IoT, and all those buzzwords impact the consumer? And I want to start with the question, before we get into AI, what is natural intelligence? What is human intelligence, right? So here we have a picture by Rembrandt van Rijk, right? It's in the Rijksmuseum, it's the Night Watch, and you have a whole pile of people taking photographs and with recording devices, sort of hearing the history of the picture. And it's continually like that in Amsterdam. Why? Because Rembrandt had an uncanny ability to paint with light. He had a beautiful sense of composition. And probably most importantly, because Rembrandt was a bit of a spendthrift, he had a good sense of picking the right people to paint so that he could pay his bills. And for all of those reasons, he landed up in the Rijksmuseum, and he is what we call a representative of something that's really important to us as humans, which is art, right? Creative intelligence, emotional intelligence, right? So a little while back, ING commissioned some programmers to create an algorithm based on Rembrandt's paintings, right? So they took all of Rembrandt's paintings and they scanned them in, and they analyzed the faces, and they analyzed the eyes and the mouths and the noses and the ruffs around the neck. And they managed to create an algorithm that produced this painting, right? Now, I would say that if I looked at this painting, this is probably not a painting that Rembrandt paints. It's probably one of his apprentices for the summer painted. It's a little bit cardboard. It hasn't quite got the light, and it probably isn't somebody who would pay his bills. But it's a stepping stone to what we would now call AI, right? And it's co-opting something that we think is very sacrosanct as a human, which is creativity, right? Another thing which is a pillar of human intelligence is the game of skill, right? The game of strategy, chess, Go, even checkers, right? And so if we went back to 1996, right? Garry Kasparov was facing off against Deep Blue, right? And he had already wiped out Deep Blue about a year and a half back in Philadelphia. And this was the rematch, right? This is a really big thing for IBM because it was man versus machine, and IBM ran this big event in New York. And the computer had advanced substantially to the point when Deep Blue challenged Kasparov. But if you just look at the challenge of playing chess as a computer, 4 consecutive moves in chess are more than 300 billion variations of possible moves. The average game of chess is 40 moves. That's more moves than atoms, or variations of moves than atoms in our universe, right? So it's very difficult for a computer to muscle through that, right? Computers aren't that fast. They're fast, but they're not that fast. So what they did is what's important about the chess game, and I know if you guys play chess, is there's the opening book, right? Then the tactical game, and then there's a closing game, right? And the opening book is about a strategy. It's very human. It's a narrative. You play a few pieces in a row, and you have an attack plan, right? And it's what computers don't do very well. What they do is play the tactical game really well, but they don't play the opening game really well. So what IBM did is they worked with a whole pile of grandmasters, and they took and they imported into the program all these, 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 all these strategies. And And because of that, they managed to play the first part of the game well, and then they ultimately beat Kasparov in the tactical game, the middle game. And this was a huge thing, right? Man against machine, machine wins, right? And really what it comes down to is ultimately computers are very good at taking a lot of data and interpreting it, right? So let's step back a bit and say we were trying to teach a computer about a stoplight, right? So if you fed in a whole bunch of data about stoplights and driver behavior, what could you extrapolate as a computer, right? You'd extrapolate that red means stop, pretty clear. Green means go. But amber's hard. If you fed data into the computer, you know what? You'd probably get that computer accelerating cars at amber, right? So data in itself is good, but it has to be tweaked and refined, and it's an iterative process. So let's define AI. So I would say that AI is a high-fidelity approximation, which is limited to the data set, right? It's only a high-fidelity approximation, and it is only as good as the data you pump in, right? So let's take a look at this guy, this cat, right? So you want to teach a computer to see a cat, to recognize a cat. Okay, so you'd say, hey, computer, round, cute face, 2 ears, lovable, fat body, has a tail, right? But then what happens when a computer then looks at another image of a cat, and it looks a little bit like that? Is that a cat? Is that a cat? Right? So when you're looking at teaching a computer, ultimately you don't want to think of a computer as an adult, right? Adults learn in a very curriculum-based way. You really want to look at a computer as a child, right? And Turing, which sort of the grand poobah of computers, right? He talked about the child machine. He said, you have to teach a computer to think like a child. You just have to give them lots of images. And what does a child do? Walks along, and it sees all these images. You have tons of images every second. And then it's got his mom and dad next to him, and they say, tree, cat, right? And you're making those associations, and you're learning. That's how a computer needs to learn, by pumping in all that data and making those associations. So if you look at the Stanford, AI and vision labs, what they did to teach a computer to see is they had to go out using Mechanical Turk, right? And they had to get people to take all these images, 50 million images, and classify them manually. So you had somebody somewhere in the world through Mechanical Turk saying, this is an image of a cat on a table, brown cat on a table in a garden. This is an image of a dog barking with a bowl, et cetera, et cetera. And we took all those images in, and they taught a computer not only to see, but also to tell you what it was seeing, right? And you see this in tons of industries. I was happy to be down in Curacao at the Smart Cities Initiative, Smart Island Initiative, as they call it now. And Huawei was presenting on smart or safe cities. And how does Huawei present a safe city solution is that it has to take in all of these images of people's faces to drive facial recognition. And once they have a critical mass of data, they can then create a safe city solution, for border crossings and for cities who want to, mitigate risk in downtown crowded areas. And industry after industry that can muster the data can come up with smart solutions. So one of the things we know about is the financial industry has tons of tick data, right? So this is a day trading algorithm that we built over 15 years. It's one of the companies that I'm associated with that extrapolates data on the fly on the perception and commitment and sentiment of the market. Those are all very human things. And it has a robotic arm that trades based on that, right? It also has, as you see, a man in the middle to make sure that that we don't make mistakes like the traffic light mistake, right? And then there are other industries that have tons of data, like the real estate industry, right? Real estate industry has tons of data about where houses were in the country, what they were sold for, and Open Door has come up with an algorithm that will buy your house without ever looking at it. You want to sell your house, you go to Open Door, it'll give you a price, you accept that price, deal done. So industry after industry are using machine learning to optimize their business process. Amazon is a poster child of that, right? They have fulfillment centers, and from the moment that you come into Amazon portal, they are feeding you information, they are making recommendations, they are optimizing the payment process so that clicks to commerce are optimized, and they also are making sure that you can buy that, not just online, but they came up with things like, the dash button allows you to click to buy something, and if you're on Amazon Prime, it's delivered within 24 hours. And now they're bringing things, as we know, with Echo into the home to allow you to do other things. This is one of the newer Echo devices, which is called Look, which is essentially a stylist in your home. So it's taking a picture of you, it's recognizing your wardrobe, and it's making recommendations. No, not that blouse today, okay? And so these are the things that are really changing the way that we behave as consumers, but it's also changing the way we behave as companies. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is 10 years of growth for the industry in retail. And for some companies, not so much growth, right? So you've got nearly 2,000% growth for Amazon because of all those things they've optimized with machine learning. And Walmart, who has to keep its bricks and mortar doors open, got a meager 2% growth, and all the other guys are thinking about shuttering their businesses. It's changing the way that we interact, and it's changing the way we run businesses. Amazon's got to the point where it's actually published APIs to allow its developer community to harness AI. And Apple and others are following suit. But what does that mean? Because really, if it's about data, who cares what tools you give the developers? Because the only guy who really commands the control is the Leviathan, Amazon, because they have the data. They give you the tools. What are you going to feed into it? Google is another one. Facebook, Baidu, Tesla. These are all companies that are in a privileged position of having data. Data is king. And even in the B2B space, you have Cisco and Ericsson. They have data, and they can do smart things with that data, and they're innovating using that data. The challenge is in the industry that if it's based on data, and the data comes from us, maybe sometimes that data comes with biases and prejudices. And so there are situations where we're looking at AI services that are proven to have inherent biases. For example, the correctional institutions in the US use AI in some states to sentence criminals. And it's proven that there are racial biases built into that. That data is not agnostic. That data is not, it's human data. And ultimately it comes with biases. But the great thing is we can tweak the traffic light, right? The same in the advertising realm. You have examples of women getting different ads for jobs than their counterparts. So all of these things need to be tweaked, and it's a little scary, right? You look at Space Odyssey, 2001, HAL 9000 looking down at you, and you think, oh my gosh, life is going to be controlled by these, these computers. Man versus machine. This is Kasparov battling, the machine again. And that can be a bit scary, a little bit intimidating. And I like to sort of step back to my buddy Sigmund Freud. And he's got a great quote in Civilization and Discontents. And if you're down at the beach and you want some light reading, this would be a good one. But, he talks about man has become a prosthetic god. We're all prosthetic gods, right? We put on all this auxiliary stuff, right? We all have it. Phones and cameras and all the wonderful IoT things we have in our homes and our offices. And we become magnificent. We're powerful. We have data. We can access stuff, right? Like, ultimately, what is my phone? If I don't want to talk to you at a party, it's a shield. I'm busy, or it's a data sword, right? I can find out information and I can beat you in an argument, right? These are things that aren't inherently here. But those organs have not grown on him naturally, and they still give him much trouble at times. And I think this is the industry challenge. What do we do over the next few years to make sure that these prosthetics are more seamless, that they integrate into our businesses and the life of the consumer in a seamless way? Because if you look at Google Glass, that was kind of cool. Remember Google Glass? Kind of cool, but it had a roadblock, and that roadblock was it didn't fit into our life seamlessly. And so there was a bit of a pivot at Google. Hey, what should we do to make this a more seamless experience? And maybe that pivot took them to Google Home. Maybe we'll look at data differently. It won't be here. It's going to be out there, and I can talk to it, right? And I don't know if you have one of these devices, whether it's Echo or whether it's Google Home, but it's amazing. Because I gave this to my mom, and she's continually just talking to data. No barriers. And I think the challenge is, not us, embracing technology, but technology embracing us. Right? And it's the Turing test, right? Can we talk to something in a way that makes us feel less intimidated? It takes the trust factor into account to make sure there are no biases in that data, so that we feel comfortable sort of navigating into this new world. And so ultimately, the challenge we have as an industry is how to do that. Because we can talk about superintelligence, which is probably going to come 10 years from now, which is really going to change stuff, right? When you have almost a sentient computer. But right now, we're dealing with these prosthetics, these small steps in AI. And we have to have trust to jump into that autonomous vehicle, right? And I want to end this talk talking about one of my heroes, Jim Henson, right? And we can learn a lot from Jim, right? He started with Sam and Friends there on the top left, and one of his first characters was Kermit, right? And what was Kermit? The glorified sock, right? That's all Kermit is, right? But what he did is he developed a character over the years until we got into the Muppets and Sesame Street, and oh my gosh, I've seen it. You have Jim, God bless him, when he was performing, and what did he do? He took this whole industry, this 100-year-old industry of puppeteering, and you had the marionettes, right, with the strings, and you drop them down onto the stage, right, and there'd be a stage there, and all the kids would be over there at the party or at the fair, and you would do the wonderful stuff, and everybody go, wow, that's really cool, and they, Judy bashing, somebody's head or whatever the case is. What he did is he sliced off those strings, right? And he took away the stage. And he took Kermit, and he dropped down to eye level. And here was the stage. This is the stage. And he talked to you at eye level. And so a kid would come up to Jim, and he would see Jim put his hand into Kermit. No secrets here. And Kermit would start to talk, and Jim was listening, right? And the kids here, and everybody is at the same, in the same conversation. And suddenly, the kid's turning to Jim and saying, hey, Jim, could you just leave the room, please? Because I'm having a private conversation with Kermit, right? And that's the way it works. And that is aspirationally where we need to go with technology. We need to develop something that's a sock puppet. It doesn't have to be such a profound technology, but it has to have the trust between the machine and the consumer. And it has to be able to communicate seamlessly in such a way that I feel that I can say to Google, hey, you go over there, I'm good, right? That's where we need to go as an industry. So as we advance, we need to delineate all of that mess that we're developing as industry leaders And we need to drop it down, and we need to make this a beautiful relationship with the consumer. And all of this mess down there, we just need to be aware as regulators that data is king. And initially, there'll only be a few kings. And we have to work with those kings to make sure that there are no biases in that data. And that's an industry project, right? And we also have to be aware that we need to design for the human in the middle. And we have to design for trust to advance where we are now with AI to the point where it's going to become super intelligent. If we do things well now, we will be able to advance to a point where this can become a prosthetic for civilization and advance us in so many ways that we cannot even imagine. Thank you very much.